at the stage you're in now, and with the precision that you're eating, I think it's worthwhile having some high days and some low days. So I would generally go for mostly medium days on your training days, perhaps some low days on your off days, and then some high day, maybe like one high day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're dieting, the high day is really useful. So without kind of going too far into it, because I know you wanted to talk about training today, just to kind of give you a brief sort of outline, the body can store your calories in 3 different ways. You can tell I like talking about nutrition. The body can store calories.
I'm down for whatever.
Yeah. So basically, protein gets stored mostly as sort of, for replenishment, essentially for muscle protein, and goes to replenish the various systems in the body, like even things like blood cells and skin and hair and all that kind of stuff. Carbs get stored as glycogen. Fat pretty much immediately goes straight to fat stores. And obviously there's some ways of changing things in and out, and we get that, like, gluconeogenesis and all that kind of stuff. So when you're in the diet phase that you're in, and you're lifting weights, which is really important to the whole deal. Lifting weights is predominantly a glycotic activity. So you burn off the carbs, right? So you can actually get yourself into a very preferential situation a very nice situation where your body preferentially restores carbs primarily before it even touches fat stores. So for example, if we have a series of medium and low days, which are in a deficit to a large deficit, and then we end on, say, Saturday with a high carb day, there's this really nice, unusual situation where those carbs will pretty much all directly go towards refilling your glycogen stores. And we have good data on this, and I've seen it in person as well. Is you can eat, there's not just a glycogen compensation, but it's a glycogen super compensation. So your body will temporarily store in excess of the carbs that it usually does, which is amazing for exercise performance, but it allows you to have a high day, potentially higher than your calorie allotment, your maintenance, and for it not to be stored as fat. So it's a really interesting way of just playing around with glycogen and carbs during the course of the week. It's mostly, I think, good for performance, which is the main thing, because right now, this is when sort of performance is going to tank. So unless you go really slow. So this is a nice way of just ensuring you keep topping up the glycogen stores. It's not magic, and it's not a massive difference. Psychologically, it's really nice, but also physiologically, it's nice to refill your glycogen preferentially. So you go into your new training week with really good training energy, because that's super important.
Yeah.
You know about like NEAT and like activity slowdowns. You can mitigate some of that with this type of strategy. So I'm a big, for guys like you, if I was coaching you, I would be a big fan of doing stuff like this, because you're precision, detail oriented.
Yeah, the relationship, when you take away the calories, your body automatically, does less. You put in less energy. So it's this weird like teeter-totter of, do more cardio, but then I don't know, it's kind of hard to balance, because I've noticed even the one day when I was quite low, I think I only ate like 1,800 calories the one day, but I just went on this big walk by my house and did a lot of like incline walking. It was probably about an hour. And I started to feel like it was crazy just going through that. At the beginning of that walk, I felt fine. But then at the end of that walk, I was like, oh, I'm just completely, like, I could feel myself burning through all that, like the calories, the energy that I had. So it was kind of it was an interesting feeling, because you got to balance it out, because if you don't, there's people, if you were to eat like super low calorie, you wouldn't be able to do anything, right? You wouldn't be able to train, and you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's true. I think a large part of the initial deficit is just your body mitigates it by reducing your activity, and literally reducing your metabolism to a small amount. So it's not a big thing. NEAT is probably the biggest thing, but there is a slight metabolic downshift as well. So I mean, these things that I'm talking about, they're minor tricks. They're not going to stoke the metabolic fire or anything crazy like that, but they're just minor tricks that most bodybuilding coaches use, because at the level that you're aiming towards, you need every percentage that you can get. So that's you'll most bodybuilding coaches will have some types of these little tricks. Like, for example, things like upping protein intake to an unreasonable amount. It's not scientifically proven, but then again, if you're trying to get to 10% body fat or 8% body fat, it can be used. You can really leverage protein intake quite a lot. So you'll often see a lot of the science doesn't really correspond to what some of the top bodybuilding coaches do for the extremes, just because some of these things aren't really tested in a laboratory. So you're trying to make life easy for the client. If you can really leverage protein, if you can really play around with carbs to allow a guy who's in contest shape condition to have a high carb day, well, it's going to feel like magic because they're going to feel like a zombie most of the time. So these are little things you can do as a coach when you're coaching these extremes of body fat to make life a bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just released, I think it was a podcast you just released. It was high protein, high frequency eating.
Yes.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because, that's almost, let's dive into that a little bit because you're eating. There's a part of me that was thinking to myself, like if I'm eating like bird meals, like 6 bird meals a day, it's like very like unsatisfying to me.
Yeah.
And I yesterday I tried that. I tried something kind of similar to that where I just tried to plan my meals out for the day. Like I was at home all day, so that was easy for me, and just eating a little bit. And you know what? I felt pretty good. I mean, obviously I was like a little hungry and I wanted to eat more than what I was eating, but it felt pretty solid. And then another day, which I want to ask you this. Do you think there's any, a lot of people will say, so say I didn't eat till like 4 p.m. Okay, let's say I fasted all day till 4 p.m. and then I got all my calories and all my macros that I needed for the day in from 4 till 8 or whatever. Yeah. Do you think there's any issue between that and the high frequency, high protein?
Yeah, I'm sorry to say there is. Yeah. Now the fasting sympathizers will tell you, look, it's all the same. And a lot of times the evidence-based bros will say, look, it's pretty much all the same. But they're talking mostly to people who aren't in your position, who aren't getting from 17% of body fat down to 10%. Like you're going to lose muscle. Like, I'm sorry, but you lost muscle that day. It happened. So when you're at that point, you're going to have to do everything you can to try and hold on to that muscle. So generally, the most optimal strategy tends to be a feeding every few hours for the best body composition. Now, that's not to say that some people might prefer fasting and it allows them to stay on the overall deficit for longer, which is cool. Like, I don't mind that. But if we're talking absolute precision, black and white statements, frequently feeding is better. And that comes from a guy who did quite a lot of fasting. I fasted for 5 days once, so just water. So I'm a big fan. It's not optimal for muscle retention.
Yeah, like I want to preserve as much muscle as possible. Yeah, I was experimenting with it. I didn't do a lot of days like that, but I did a couple days like that just to see like how my body felt. Because for me, it does seem easier to just go without food for 8 hours. But then there is the I've already kind of knew, like, if you're not feeding on protein reasonably frequently, that there's going to be some issues there potentially.
Yeah, I mean, one of the arguments that Brad Pilon has made in his book was that the body goes in and recycles proteins, like waste proteins, to use during the course of the day. I don't know. I think it's wishful thinking. So it's not in my experience. I think if you're getting down to that low percent body fat, and again, just for the audience, we are talking about guys looking to get below 15, below 10% body fat. If you're 20, 30% body fat and you're sat there, okay, I'll just put it bluntly for people listening. If you're sat there and you can't see your abs at all, like, do what you like, right? Do whatever you like. Don't worry about this. But if we're talking about people who are looking to get down to very lean conditions, it does make a difference.
Yeah, and then there was a part of me that was kind of, I don't know what you would call it exactly, but eating just pure protein until about 6 p.m. So say instead of fasting, you're just fasting from fats and carbs. Is that a way that you can kind of mitigate? You're almost like fasting. Like when you just eat protein, like you can actually die just eating protein. Isn't that correct? Like it's like, what do they call it? Like rabbit starvation?
Rabbit starvation. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, you're still like almost in a fasted state when you're just eating protein. And then maybe you can do that to mitigate the muscle loss, and then eat your fats and carbs like later on at night, just so you can get a good sleep and you feel full and satisfied. Do you think that's a way of doing it?
That's a great way of doing it. So they typically refer to that as a protein sparing modified fast.
Yeah.
And I'm a much bigger fan of that. In fact, one of the methods that I consistently get clients ask me about and come to me for is my fastest fat loss approach, which is it's basically a modified PSMF, which is the best way to go about doing a very low calorie diet, which is just leveraging high protein, high vegetables. Now, I would say to you, if that's your strategy, potentially also include some vegetables alongside that. So maybe some really lean vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts. Yeah.
Perfect. You've seen my Instagram. It's all that stuff. So I'm sure you do the same, because at that point in the diet, you have to. So yeah, I'm a much bigger fan of that than I am of actual fasting. So if you want to do that, that's all good. The problem with not including the vegetables is you miss out on quite a lot of micronutrition, which is going to make you just feel worse. It won't matter for a day, and if you load up on vegetables later, that's fine. But let's say, for example, you have your first 3 meals of the day is just a protein shake. You're going to miss out on a ton of potassium, a ton of magnesium. You're going to go into that evening feeling a little bit more, like a teeny bit more stressed, a teeny bit more fatigued. You're probably not going to sleep quite as well. You'll be slightly more sort of sympathetic drive, nervous system drive. It'll just be slightly worse. If I'm going to set up a diet like that, and I do that for my low days, I will have somebody eating, let's say 150 grams of chicken is about 50 grams of protein, plus say 100 or 200 grams of vegetables. Now that is a meal of about 250 to 300 calories, but you'll be full. Add some hot sauce to that, you're full. It's a very filling meal. And so I would rather somebody do that a couple of times a day and then go into the evening meal actually fairly full. Because the thing is, Damien, if you go into the evening meal relatively hungry because you've been, starving all day, whether that's mentally or physically, then you're going to have more, you're going to have to battle it more. And the thing that I try and do with my diets is I try to set it up so willpower is less of an issue. If you can make the diet easier in that respect, it's better. I think, I don't want to cover too many points in one spiel, but another thing I want to say is, I think a lot of coaches try and do is they try and give the client something that they want almost every day or every week. It's like, have a cheat meal, have a treat today, be flexible in your diet. But ultimately, those calories are going to have to come from somewhere. And so I think what ends up happening is you end up amplifying the client's appetite. And then when the client inevitably cheats and goes off the diet, you sort of blame them. You go, oh, well, look, you didn't stick to the plan. I gave you flexibility. But what you're not realizing is the flexibility that you're giving them is actually contributing to them wanting more. And I think I mentioned this last time we spoke, if every Saturday is when you have your donuts and your pancakes, then every other day is going to be worse by comparison. If you always insist on including treats in your diet, then you're always going to be spiking your appetite and you're going to have less room for filling things. When I'm on a diet, I'd like to be as boring as possible. And it makes for a very, very boring Instagram. People actually ask me, like, is that all you eat? Like I'm lying or something. But no, I go very boring because ultimately I don't have to think about things. That's why. Yeah. Sorry, long spiel.
I prefer that as well. Cool, man. Well, I'll definitely stop doing the fasting till 4 p.m. Because I wouldn't even say it was any less. I wouldn't say it's less miserable. If anything, it's like, I don't think, because yesterday I just did the spaced out meals, but I ate the same amount of calories. I think on the fasting day I ended up eating a little bit less, but I don't want to sacrifice my muscles, so I'll have to keep working around that. I
think it's kind of like sleep as well. People build up a sleep deficit and think they can sleep it off on the weekend. It never really works out. It's kind of the same with a hunger deficit. So if you fast till 4, you're still building up quite a lot of hunger, and it will come out at some point. It doesn't generally tend to be a great long-term strategy for people.
Absolutely, man. All right, buddy. Well, let's jump into some training questions.
Yes. Okay.
Could talk to you for hours about various topics, but let's talk about training. I guess maybe the first thing let's just kind of go into your training philosophy, how it's kind of evolved, because you started with powerlifting, correct?
That's right.
That was your first thing, so very strength focused. And then what kind of, like, now it seems like what I see on your Instagram, it's very just hypertrophy focused. From what I can tell, it doesn't look like you're doing any like crazy heavy power lifts anymore. Like, what did that evolution look like, and what kind of mass did you build while you were powerlifting, and what did that transition look like as you went into more bodybuilding hypertrophy focused stuff?
Yeah, so when I got into powerlifting almost immediately, which was quite unusual, but I competed within 9 months of training for the first time in a proper gym. Over the course of probably 12 to 15 years, I built up a large amount of mass. I think I was probably my biggest ever just powerlifting, just because I was eating a lot and handling relatively heavy loads for reps, building a lot of strength, building a lot of mass. I think the majority of the time when I was bodybuilding, I'm not sure I can confidently say I actually built any more muscle, because I went from overly fat 93, 95 kilos to on stage 80. And that was the weight that I competed at. So I can't really say that I actually gained muscle. I probably just maybe gained a marginal amount in some areas. Like I definitely gained some in the delts and the arms because they were smaller coming from a powerlifting background. Maybe some on the hamstrings as well, but that's about it. I couldn't really argue that I got bigger doing bodybuilding, but then mine was a very unusual situation because I was training hard and heavy 15 years. So yeah, nowadays, part of the reason that I do most of the hypertrophy work is those are my goals. I also think for longevity, it's the best thing. I'm 40 this year. So, and while that's not really old in the grand scheme of things, I am conscious that over the next 10 years, I'll be 50 and then onward from there. So I'm looking at really optimizing my health. And one thing that muscle is really good for is having an anti-diabetic effect because it's a pool for glycogen. So, and glycogen is all the carbs you eat. So it directly impacts your health. It's very, very good to have a lot of muscle and be lean. So sometimes I think if I was to do things again, would I just solely start on bodybuilding? And I don't know, maybe from a health point of view, I think it's probably better. But then I think psychologically, I probably would have had more issues if I'd gone straight into bodybuilding. But
fair enough.
I kind of leapfrogged over all that because while all my friends were trying to bodybuild and trying to get abs and all that kind of stuff, I was lifting heavy, being fat and being happy. It was good. My 20s were fun for that reason, So, yeah. And so when I made that transition, in terms of the things you were asking about, what did the transition look like? Funnily enough, I was just talking with Jeffrey Verity Schofield on his YouTube about this because he's been on this kick with Steve about why is Jeffrey so weak. And I never, you saw that, yeah.
That's funny.
See, I never thought Jeffrey was weak. Because I've been through the transition the other way. I went from being a very strong powerlifter to being a very strong bodybuilder. Being a reasonable bodybuilder. So let me point this to you, right? I was a 4-plate bencher as a powerlifter, right? Now, what do you think I would be using for a set of 10 if I was a 4-plate bencher?
I don't even know. Maybe like it's hard to tell. Like 2 plates.
like three. I think I did like 3 plates for 8 to a 140 bench, to the 180 bench. So yeah, like 3 plates. I'm repping out. Now, what do you think I would have to reduce to then do that in a bodybuilding manner? Maybe another 20 kilos. Yeah. So now I'm down to 2.5 plates. I was a 4-plate bencher a second ago, and now I'm down 2.5 plates. I'm doing that for a set of 10 in a bodybuilding style, slowing the way down. Now, what if I'm doing that for say multiple sets and reps? So maybe I'm doing that for 3 sets of 10 to 15. All of a sudden, I'm a 110, 240 pound, 260 pound bencher, right?
Yeah,
so,
you got to humble yourself. Actually, that's an interesting concept too. I was actually talking about this with my brother, how people will say like, I'm a 4-plate bencher or whatever. So say you have everyone's obsessed with 1 rep max, right? Like, oh, I bench 225. Okay. But for how many reps? We don't talk about muscle endurance. It's all about like that one, the 1 rep max. It's like, how much do you bench, bro? It's like, well, if I do 225 for 10 reps, that's almost less impressive as someone doing, 250 for 1. Like people just are always obsessed with the weight for that 1 rep max, but we don't really talk about endurance and just actually like, just the sheer amount of work capacity and volume.
Yeah, it's just numbers. People are just interested in numbers. And that 250, that 260, maybe if it's bounced, the spotter had a hand in it, it's way more, like the 225 for 10 is way more impressive. So anyway, going back to what I was saying, like I never thought Jeff was weak at all because I've seen it from the other perspective. Like if I was to have carried on with the same form that I was using when I was a powerlifter and doing the volume that I needed to do as a bodybuilder, my joints would have been a wreck. And I know that because I did try that for a while and I just kept getting injured. So when I stopped the powerlifting, I carried on using my same powerlifting form for deadlifts, for squats and for benches because clearly that makes sense, right? Joking. And I started doing sets of 10 to 15, sets of 8, just kept getting hurt. Like little minor tears, minor niggles, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, what's going on? But I really had to humble myself. And I mean, I didn't really have an ego in it, but I really had to change my form. And it takes a while to do that. If you've been benching if you've perfected a bench form in a certain way over 15 years, in which the leg drive is just perfect, the level of bounce is just perfect, it's great by powerlifting standards, but it's all designed to shift weight, and you're trying to change that to a bodybuilding form. Well, it takes a lot to make that transition. So I had to use far less loads. I think I recall benching strictly about 2.5 plates for probably 8s, I think, and that was nice and strict, and that was good, and that was when I was my biggest and strongest. But that's not that strong, as a bodybuilder, as a powerlifter. But for a bodybuilder, doing those control sets and reps is pretty good. So, yeah, I think with the whole Jeffrey thing, I never once thought he was weak. I think this is people's misunderstanding about what bodybuilding strength is if you're doing it right, and that's all he's always ever been interested in. And what I said to him was, conversely, if he was to ever go into powerlifting and spend 6 months just changing his form, he would probably see some rapid progress in strength.
No, that's interesting. I want to dive into that idea of, changing your form for bodybuilding, because when you think about powerlifting, you're trying to make your form, you're trying to, manipulate form in order to make the lift as easy as possible, or I guess to lift the most amount of weight. But for bodybuilding, you're really just trying to stress the muscle as much as possible. So maybe for benching, that'd be like super arch retracted, you're less range of motion. But for powerlifting, but for bodybuilding, you'd want to really like milk it out and get a good stretch. So I don't know, what are the form differences there that you're talking about exactly?
What you said there initially, you're trying to make it as easy as possible. That's correct. You are trying to make it as easy as possible, because you want as little fatigue when you're lifting as possible. You want the numbers, you want the reps. And it's the exact opposite to bodybuilding. With bodybuilding, you have to lean into the pain. And part of something I'm going to be discussing on my channel soon is intra set rest periods. So that is the rest you take between the reps. Like if you're really into perfecting everything with bodybuilding, you have to take all these things into account, because you've probably seen this in a gym, Damien. You've seen guys do sets of leg presses or squats, and as the set gets harder, they take more and more rest in between the reps, right? So rep 5, they keep pushing, rep 6, rep 7, rep 8, tough, lock the legs out, breathe, and then they go again for 9, another one, breathe, go again for 10. What they're doing, they're avoiding pain. They think it's about getting the reps, but it's not about getting the reps. You lean into the pain. What are you running from? Like, you want to fail or get close to failure. You want the pain. You want the muscles to go through those painful points of the set. That's what you're there for. It's the complete opposite attitude to a powerlifter or whatever, a strength athlete. You're looking to get one more rep, another rep. You're just good at, you might rest, you might just push it out. For a bodybuilder, it's the opposite. And so when I see people do that and do other things like wrap their arms and wrap their legs excessively, and get spotter force reps, it just drives me nuts. There was this guy in the gym that I go to, and he's just this little PT guy, and he wraps his arms for the bench press. He uses knee wraps on his arms. It's the single stupidest thing I've seen in my life. And he'll bench, so he'll put 3.5 plates on, and he'll bench it halfway down, and his spotter will take it, and he thinks he's a 3.5 plate bencher. It's amazing. And so he was talking to me about it once outside the gym, and he says, "Yeah, I have this shoulder issue, so that's why I do it that way." And I just said, "Dude, you can feel free to bullshit yourself, but don't bullshit me. Like, if you were injured, you wouldn't be doing stupid stuff like that." But but anyway, go back to my point. It's the avoidance of pain. And with bodybuilding, you want to lean into that pain, the productive type of pain. So you want to make things as hard as possible. So that is, you aim for those really high painful repetitions where you get lots of rep drop off. You aim for consistent intra set between rest periods. So you just keep pushing, going into the hardness that you aim for a fuller range of motion. If that makes the lift harder, if it makes it more productive for you, you want to avoid anything which is going to artificially elevate your numbers. I think that's a pretty big statement, but I think I'm pretty confident saying that. Yeah.
No, yeah, that all makes sense for sure. To go back to form, I want to talk about something just specifically with bench. I would, we were always taught, I don't know, I was a personal trainer. What I was taught was always retract your scapula and hold it in retraction the whole time. But I actually used to have a lot of shoulder blade pain and issues in my upper, I guess my shoulder blades. And actually the way that I fixed that was actually allowing my shoulder to protract, not like super aggressively at the top, like where I'm like rounded, but just allowing that like natural movement of the scapula. And I think for powerlifting, it's like very like retracted the whole time. What is your like what would you say is your bodybuilding press form now? Like, do you allow that protraction of the scapula as well? Like,
it's a really interesting topic. I'm glad we're getting into this because I've been thinking about it a lot. So back in the day, the general form for everyone was retract your shoulder blades, keep your shoulders stable. Then there was one online coach who I'm not a massive fan of, but so I won't point out his name, but he very sort of famously declared that that's just nonsense, and if you're doing that, you're an idiot, and you should just have your shoulders back and forth. And this guy, he loves speaking in absolutes, and it's hilarious to watch him just train wreck his career. But so anyway, I think there's a happy medium, and I think there's a happy medium because there's going to be individual differences. I don't know for certain, but I suspect it's down to leverages. I suspect if you're a monkey-armed bencher like I am, you probably need more shoulders and scapular stability. I suspect if you're a little bit more barrel-chested, then you are probably better off being a bit looser. This is what I suspect. All I know is for certain there is inter-individuality on this topic. I've heard both sides. I don't think it's clear-cut. I don't think it's as clear-cut as it used to be of everyone retract. And I certainly don't think it's as clear-cut now as everyone should be just loose and bench as and when.
Yeah, it depends.
I think it very much depends on your build and what you need. Because some people with longer arms, getting them to do that, I mean, you're adding a couple of inches onto an already long stroke, and that's going to make, and it's just by virtue of leverage, like you're that far out, it's going to make things a lot more unsteady in the shoulder joint. I think you might possibly get more benefit in your shoulders and development if you are that barrel, and you can get away with it then if you have got that barrel-chested build. So I don't think it's as clear-cut as people like to think.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of thought because people would say you're not really working your serratus if you don't protract. So say you're doing a push-up and you protract, then you really work your serratus muscle, but I'm not really sure how that works exactly.
Maybe. I mean, I never had any issues with serratus development. Mine were very well developed once I got leaned down, and I always retracted. So I don't know. I think with some of these things, people reverse engineer arguments. So they'll think something feels good, and they go, look, and they've been told their whole life, retract. Then they try to let loose. That feels better, and then they go, okay. So rather than just go online and go, hey guys, this feels better for me, they kind of reverse engineer a whole bunch of reasons why and tell everyone else that they're doing it wrong. It's like there's a lot of that on the internet. We're not just satisfied with saying, hey guys, this works for me. You have to go to PubMed, you have to find an abstract, you have to read part of that abstract, but not all of it because you're a no. And then you have to, say, bring up all these whole reasons why you're right and everyone else is wrong. It's not enough in this day and age just to say it works okay for me. So yeah, I think that's my perspective on that.
You have to make everyone feel stupid for doing what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, cool. Absolutely. You have to be the first responder to everything. It's great. It's I was the first adopter to this.
I'll definitely say I've definitely fallen prey to that mindset around training where I'll hear some big and strong coach who seems like he knows what he's talking about, and I'll be like, deadlifts are stupid for hypertrophy, bro, because he said it, and I'm not, and I'm still things that I hear, I'll just kind of almost parrot. But the less ignorant I become, and the more educated I start to realize, this is there's definitely many paths up the mountain. There's not everything is just black and white.
Yeah, I think it just comes with experience as well. I mean, because I've been around for so long and I've been interested in fitness, you kind of see a lot of fads which then die out. So when you get new stuff that comes up, rather than think it's going to be the next best thing, you just think it might be. I'm interested in hearing more about it, but also it might be rubbish. I mean, 15 years ago, BCAAs, that's a great example. Yeah. Everyone was loving BCAAs. Now everyone's loving EAAs. I don't know. I'm still on the fence, So it's they might have a benefit, they might not. I've read all the research. I understand. I'm sure there'll be someone in the comments saying, actually, Faz, EAAs do this and this. I've heard it all before. But it's just, with stuff like that. I'm not saying I'm too cool for any of that kind of stuff. All I'm saying is I just want it to be a bit more established before it's something that I necessarily recommend to people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that at some point the science itself is not as powerful as just anecdote that has worked for a long time, you know, because you can't really like, not everything can be I don't know, proven correct. Like some things just you just see, as someone who's coached a bunch of people, you probably even find things to contradict the science, you know?
Yeah, I mean the protein thing was an example of that. I think the phrase that I like to use is absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So just because it's not been tested by the science doesn't necessarily mean it's something we can't leverage. So if you think about it though, I mean, we're, just to get really philosophical about this whole thing, we're only on this earth for a short amount of time, right? Now, if we're waiting for science and in a relatively new field like hypertrophy to come up with the answers, we might be waiting till well past our prime. Right? I would rather get somebody get in the gym and do something that they enjoy and they can do productively and do that. And not necessarily wait for science to approve that. It's kind of like what I was saying to you in the last episode about CrossFit. If you enjoy it, cool. Like it gets you off the couch, it gets you doing something. Is it the most optimal? Probably not. And you're training hard now in bodybuilding, which is great. But I think if people are waiting for science to give them direction, it's not. Science is not the best for prescription. It is the best for providing you with some clues as to what direction to go on. It's not generally not a prescription to say, hey, do this. And the times when it has done that, it's often fallen on its face, particularly with hypertrophy. With strength, it's a lot more established.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, yeah, I would like to go into just, you know, like I guess exercise selection and what movements in particular are good for hypertrophy. Let's go into that thing that I just brought up. You know, some people will argue that the deadlift, the conventional deadlift, is not a good movement for hypertrophy, and I get the argument. And personally, I tend to do stiff leg deadlifts. That's kind of like my main movement right now. But there's definitely a part of me that, you know, when I start bulking again, maybe I want to do a phase or a block where I do conventional deadlifts. And I'm just kind of curious, you know, like the argument people make against like big compound lifts and like what do you feel about that, and why do you think those movements may or may not be good for hypertrophy?
Okay, there's a lot to say on that. I think the first thing to point out is that it's contextual. So somebody who's deadlifting 2 plates aside for a sets of 10, that person can't realistically make the argument that the stimulus to fatigue ratio is off, because they're just too piss weak to really complain about that kind of stuff. It doesn't tread water. A guy who's deadlifting, say, 400 pounds for a sets of 10, that's a different kettle of fish. You know, there is a lot of systemic recovery demands there. So I think the first thing is it has to be contextual. I think you get a lot of beginners doing this, and I'm not sure they necessarily need to worry about it, because the stimulus to fatigue for a beginner is probably pretty good for deadlifts, you know, because it hits a lot of muscle, all that kind of stuff. I think the other thing is we have to look at the different systems of the body and how well they recover. This was getting a bit technical, but you've got different parts of your body which are involved in lifting. So you've got the muscles, clearly. You've got ligaments, joints. You've got your neuromuscular system, just like adrenaline, fatigue, all that kind of stuff. You got all these parts of your body which are stressed when you hit a training session. What you want to try and do is, this is the crux of the argument, you want to try and leverage as much stress onto the muscles as possible and minimize stress everywhere else. And that's really what this entire debate is about on both sides. Can we maximize stress on the muscles and minimize it everywhere else? One, because that's the goal. Who cares about how strong your ligaments are on the Olympia stage? Doesn't matter. And also, two, the muscles tend to recover the fastest. So if we can get into some kind of crazy situation where we're only limited by our muscles and not our ligaments, then it means we can grow the fastest because we can hit them over and over again with as much volume as possible. Now, we can't do that because the ligaments and connective tissues are always going to be stressed and always going to be involved. So all of these methods that you have heard and you've had people on your podcast talk about, like deloads, wave loading, conjugate, all those different things, that is the overriding concept that they all have in common. That is the problem they are all trying to solve, and they all do it in different ways. So when I see videos on deloading, like trash talking deloading and talking more about load variations or conjugate versus this, they're all trying to solve the same problem, which is how do we solve that problem of applying as much stress to the muscles as possible while minimizing stress on the ligaments, joints, and the connective tissues and the neuromuscular system. That is the crux of it. So we want to select exercises which allow us as individuals to place as much stress as possible on the muscles and not be limited by those factors. So again, contextually, if you're a beginner, it's just not really much of a concern unless your form for deadlift is terrible, in which case, fine. So if somebody sat there thinking, I only bench a plate aside and my lower back keeps hurting, your form is probably crap, right? So let's fix that first, but that's not a fault of the exercise. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to choose exercises which allow us to place the most stress on the muscles possible, which is one of the reasons why most advanced bodybuilders, they all use machines. I mean, that's what I've described there in the last minute or two is the overriding argument for why this occurs, or all these things happen. Bodybuilders who are in the pro stage typically all use tons of machines because they are maximizing stress on the muscles. They're at the point in their careers where that's the only thing holding them back. They just need to apply more and more stress. The amount of stress that like a Rolly Winkler or whoever else is at the top now, Ramy, the amount of stress they need to apply to their muscles to actually grow, even with all the drugs, is just an incredibly high threshold. So there's a reason why, I mean, I've seen Ramy doing sets of 20 on the leg press just over and over and over and over and over again. That he can't do that with squats. He would crush himself. It's just not something he can do. So he might do some squats. He might do some Smith machine squats, but in general, he's going to be able to accumulate more volume doing machine exercises for that reason.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of curious. Is there benefit to, as a beginner, there's probably benefit to like ligaments and joint or connective tissue. Like that stuff does adapt, does it not? Like, like that stuff needs to get stronger as well. But maybe you just get to a certain point where that can't really adapt anymore. And then you just want to take as much stress off that as possible. So is that kind of like would there be an argument to be made for why beginners should kind of stay away from machines for a little bit, or does it not really matter?
I don't think it really matters. I mean, in my beginner book, I do have beginners using barbells with the proviso that if they really don't get on with them, then they should switch to machines. So, but the reason that I give is for learning movement patterns. So if we take the squat is the best one because it's the most variable in terms of how people pick it up. Some people are natural. Some people just think it just have horrendous form. So with the squat, if you can squat and you can squat well, and you continue to hammer the squat over time and improve your form, then you can pretty much go on to any other leg machine and do very well on it. If you can squat great, high bar, deep, all the way down, and feels good, you can go onto a hack squat and excel. Go onto a Smith machine squat and excel. Now, if you're going onto a barbell and you really can't do very well with it, and we've tried for a few weeks, I'm almost immediately going to pull you off and do a leg press, because the leg, and it's probably because you're like me, a long-limbed lifter. So in doing so, by building up your legs with the leg press, we can build up and fill in your leverages to make you more of a better squatter. That was a tactic I always used. I did a reasonable amount of squatting, but then I also backed up with a lot of leg press volume to fill out my quads. I did this recently with a beginner, Connor. He's built like Liu Xiaojin, the Chinese weightlifter. He has like a long torso and really hobbit legs, and he's an amazing squatter. You should see this guy. He only squats like a plate and a half, right? He's almost a rank beginner. But seriously, you could put him in a Chinese weightlifting hall and he wouldn't look out of place squatting. It's hilarious. But no one's ever told him that before. I'm like, your squat is a thing of beauty. But anyway, he's so advantaged for the squat. He's incredibly disadvantaged for the deadlift. And he's probably one of the first beginners who I've taken off the full deadlift and put onto rack deadlifts, just so he can keep his really long torso in a good position and emphasize that before later on we put him back down to regular deadlifts or trap bar deadlifts or sumo deadlifts. So that's my general philosophy on beginners. For that reason, if somebody isn't a great squatter, if we just build their quads, it'll improve their leverages. The reason why people aren't great squatters is typically because their limbs are longer, and so there needs to be more muscle on the thigh to be able to drive it up as well, if that makes sense.
I like what you brought. I like what you brought up there. You'll get someone on the. Let's just take the squat. You get someone on the barbell squat. Maybe they're not doing it very well. So then you take them to a leg press, and you slowly build up. You build up the quads, and then you kind of almost like, instead of what most people would think is beginners should start on the basic barbell movements, but sometimes you go to the machines and then you get a better squat because of that. And for me, I actually ran into some problems with my a kind of low to mid back. Like I was getting a lot of back pain. I had an injury that I never really knew what the injury was from, but on the right side of my back, like something happened, and I can't remember like an acute moment where it happened, but it actually caused me to have chronic pain for like 3 to 4 years, man. Like in my early 20s, like I had some really bad back pain. And I kept trying to work through the compounds. And like, eventually I was like, oh, I need to like step back and almost like rebuild. So what I did is just, I stuck to like leg press and hack squat. And then I tried to do movements that more like kind of isolated back extension or hip extension, like 45-degree back extension and stuff like that. Do you have a lot of experience with any kind of back pain? Because I know you did have a podcast episode where you suffered some chronic back pain for quite a while, like quite a few months. And then do you get clients that have a lot of issues with, squats and deadlifts? Because those movements can be taxing on the low back. And I don't think they cause the problem. But I think for me, anecdotally, it was just like a weakness in my back. Because now that I've strengthened things and I go back to, good mornings and RDLs and squats, I don't seem to have any problems anymore. I'm kind of curious about that.
Would you say you're more of a squatter or a deadlifter? Curiously,
I think at this point I'm better at deadlifting.
Okay,
but
in terms of like limb lengths, you're long limbed or short limbed or long torso?
I think I have quite long arms for my body.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I haven't really thought about leverages all that much, but maybe I'll take some video and send them your way and see what you think.
Yeah, feel free. No, just curious. I'm always thinking about these things. So I think when it comes to pain, so I had a back injury in 2020. It was a ridiculous, the most ridiculous thing. It was an injury from as a biking injury, like cycling. Ridiculous. I've had 20 years in the gym, no back injuries. My back's been bomb proof, and then I get injured on a bike, just trying to, it was like lockdown, trying to get out and do something, and it didn't work out very well. So anyway, it was a really bad back injury, and I think it contributed, like that as well as the lockdowns. I think it contributed to me losing quite a lot of muscle in 2020, more than I initially thought, because back just affects everything. Yeah. So I think the main thing you have to do, sort of the attitude shift you have to have with injuries, is you have to go from this traditional view of injuries, which is, okay, you've been unlucky, you've broken something, you've got to rest, to, which is a very common thing, which is said by like doctors and some physios even up to this point, because it's based on a traditional view of medicine from decades ago when some of these guys were trained. I mean, they're not trying to put you on your local doctor is not trying to put you on the wrong track, but if he was trained 30, 40 years ago, he's going to have these viewpoints like, okay, look, you've injured yourself, just don't do anything anymore. Sit down, chill. You were unlucky. At least you're still alive, right? Or whatever. Now, the new view from medicine and from more recently trained doctors and more recently trained physios, the new view is, okay, you got hurt, probably because you're weak, and now you're even weaker because you got hurt. So what strengthens us up is exercise. So that is the best thing. And to sort of just cap that off, where people go wrong in coming back from injury is they rush. And what happens when you rush? You re-injure yourself. So over and over again, they get this message, which is like, my back's hurt. I've heard it again. 10 years down the line, they're still complaining about the back because of that inherent belief of, okay, I've messed myself up and I've been unlucky and I keep being unlucky. And then it's just like, it's my back. They start to identify with it. But I mean, as you probably, just go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I just hate the idea of people saying, oh, I have a bad back. It's like, but why do you have a bad back? And I get it. When I was miserable and in pain, it felt like I was going to be crippled for life. And it was depressing, man. Like, I think the most mental health issues I've ever had was when I was dealing with like just a miserable back, and like, I don't know, anybody who goes through back pain can probably attest to, or any kind of chronic pain, when it sticks around for a while, you're like, is this my life now?
Yeah, that's it. That's
miserable.
Exactly. That's what you think. I literally thought the same thing. It's
Yeah.
amazing you say that. There was one day where it was the worst, and the pain was so bad it took my breath away. That's it. Like I just couldn't breathe. It was that bad. The pain was so bad that I couldn't get up out of bed. I couldn't roll. I was just like, that's it. I'm just gonna stay here for a while. But that's how bad it was. So I just slowly rehabbed myself. I just basically got back in the gym as soon as possible and carried on training. Hyperextensions were really good, and just starting off slow. And anyway, so with that view of injury, I think is probably the best way for people to get back. And I've known lots of people to do the same thing. I'll also say this. There was a study I read years ago, and they x-rayed a bunch of American footballers. And these were guys who were self-professed healthy players. So they were still playing, still active. And American football is a really brutal sport. It's they just charge into each other and everything. And so all of these guys came into the x-ray room and saying, yeah, I'm healthy. I'm great. I'm playing. What do I do? And so they x-rayed them. And I think it was something like 97% of them, maybe, they had like really, really bad chronic injuries. So like the rotator cuff was torn up, the hips were out of place, like back ligaments were messed up. They had disc
herniated disc.
Yeah, and they were like, "How do you feel?" Like, I feel fine. Like, what's the problem? Let's go play. So they didn't notice, and I think that's the point that I want to. I always say that to people because it gives them a little bit of hope to say, "Look, the pain you're feeling now is very real. Don't get me wrong, it is. Over time, if the pain remains, it's probably not the original pain. It's just you thinking about it a lot and getting used to it, and also not strengthening yourself." So yeah, and I knew that. So the first thing I did, even though I had those intruding thoughts, thinking to myself, maybe this is just gonna be me for life. Like, that's it. I hit 40. You know what? I've had a good run. That's it. Right?
I'm just gonna sit on the couch.
Yeah, man. Sit on the couch. That's it. I can do my coaching. It's fine. So, but yeah, it was now it's like, I'm back to pretty much back to normal. But this is part of my whole drive. When I have guys who are injured or girls who are injured, especially if they get injured for the first time, I immediately jump in with the care, with the support, and just with the positivity to say, you know what, dude, this is an opportunity to learn. And I did that with a beginner recently, Mitch. Mitch is a great guy. He's 60 years old. First time he's lifted weights in his life, and he's doing incredibly well. He's up to almost 2 plates for like sets of 8 on the squat and deadlift. He's killing it.
Oh, yeah. But
he hurt his back, and I immediately went in with the whole recovery spiel. And because when you're a beginner, it's like when you're a baby, and when kids like fall on the floor and start crying, or like about to start crying, they look at you, and if you smile, hey, so before he had a chance to react, I was like, this is fine, this is great, this is an opportunity. We're going to learn how to rehab. This is going to be great. You're going to get injured all throughout your whole rest of your life. Let's learn how to fix it. And he's like, okay, cool. And 6 weeks later, we're back on top of things. All good. Because I never wanted to get into that depressed place, because it happens. So,
yeah, if you look on my Instagram, like even like a lot of the compound movements where I'm loading, like doing axial loading or whatever, I don't go very heavy. Like even to this day, like I'm just gradually working my way up. Like at one point it would be so say, I would go back to Romanian deadlifts, and oh shit, I tweaked my back, or my back just, the pain came back, and I'd be like, fuck, I kept getting frustrated. Then I'd go back to the drawing board, try to like just do some other movement to work my back. And then eventually, Romanian deadlifts feel good now. Like I can constantly do Romanian deadlifts. My back doesn't bug me anymore. Awesome. And then it was good mornings. And even when I do good mornings, I feel it. It's on the right side of my spine. I don't know what it is. Like pain is so complex, and I'm not an expert at all, but just you start to kind of feel out your body. And the more I do good mornings, I'm like, oh, that's actually like doing wonders for my back. Like it's starting to, and I'm going light. I'm not going super heavy. I'm just trying to focus on that point in my back, and I'm not trying to ego lift. And one thing that the rabbit hole I fell down was all this like correctional exercise bullshit. And I absolutely despise that shit now. Like these people because like there's so many people that are in pain and like struggling, and then you're like, do this with a resistance band and like all these stupid movements, when it was like, man, you could just do the movement that you're trying to do with like different weight, like there's other things you can do, but I don't know, like the correctional exercise, like that's a bunch of snake oil in my opinion.
The movement that hurt you will be the movement that heals you in therapeutic doses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. It works. Yeah, I'm very dubious about a lot of physios. Very dubious.
Even okay, maybe we'll dive into that too. Like physios, I've never had a good experience with a physio. And I know that there are good ones out there, but all like what you're gonna rub my back and put needles in my back that don't do shit. It's all placebo.
Yeah, I think most of it is due to lack of experience from the physio, because they're like PTs. They will grab onto any industry trend, and for the last 10 years or so, it's been glutes. So you could go into a physio's office with like, I don't know, fucking cancer or something, and they're like, "Oh, your glutes are weak. They're inactive." It's the most ridiculous.
Your core, bro.
Yeah, your core, bro. Yeah, exactly. You're not activating it. So, and then you just promptly fall on the floor because if you deactivate your core, So, yeah, it's just I think they fall prey to a lot because they have a lot of the same education as general PT, and it's kind of what I was saying to you last time we talked. Your average PT is about 10 years behind the industry, what the top leaders are doing on the industry. So whatever is the current trend, your local physio, unless he's very well read, is going to be lagging behind quite a lot. And most of the time, they're just looking desperately for stuff that other physios are doing who they respect in their field. I mean, it's the same thing, Damon. You remember 5 years ago where everyone was on the whole, you got to train a body part twice a week. Bro splits are like dumb. You remember that we went through that whole thing. 10 years ago, do you remember the whole if you macros, protein and Pop-Tarts? People, it's just, and the PTs that were doing that at the same time in the field of physio, the physios were all doing the same thing with that. So just because they're not as well known as your PT and people don't make like reels about them and like comedy skits, it's the same thing. Your average PT has the same level of education and they're not going to be able to offer you anything special. So you should approach them with the same skepticism as you do with any PT in the gym, which by the way should be a fucking lot of skepticism because a lot of them are, I don't know how they earn their money.
Yeah, like I don't have a lot of respect for personal trainers. Yeah. And that comes from someone who worked as a personal trainer for a little bit and just realizing like, yeah, dude, with it, a lot of them are extremely ignorant. And when I was a personal trainer, I was ignorant. You just the same, like you described, you just kind of like latch on to certain things. It takes so long. Even now, like the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know. Like I'm just like, I try to just remain extremely studious to this because it's people are doing, you have what, 32 years experience doing this or something like that?
22. Yeah.
22. And you're still learning tons all the time.
I think it can be, I mean, it happens with online coaches as well, but I think it's more a case of, I definitely agree, but I think it's also a case of, you're always going to get the majority of people in a certain industry. They're not going to want to carry on their education because they're just too concerned with the bills, with retaining their job, getting more clients. They're more interested in advertising. They're just not in it for like a long-term view on learning. So you're always going to get that. There's nothing completely bad about physios or nothing completely bad about PTs as a whole. So if anyone's listening, don't get offended. We're not saying that. All we're saying is that the majority of people just are not lifelong learners. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I more than likely said a lot of dumb shit 10 years ago, and I for a long time, there's probably a lot of dumb stuff I said. I mean, if you look back at the old Muslim Brawn forums with Steve Shaw, like 2012, 2007, 8, yeah, probably a lot of dumb stuff on there. But if you have the attitude that you want to learn and you want to get better, then that usually helps. You can usually go places that, and that's you can that by talking to some of these guys. You talk to a PT for 5 minutes, you will know very quickly, particularly in where I live. I live in a fairly small city. Like, sounds really conceited to say this, but most people know who I am in terms of like my business and stuff. So if I talk to a young PT and I try to offer them some advice because we're talking, I can tell if they're going to go places in 5 or 10 years just by how much they listen. If they don't and they just try and like return with giving me advice and stuff, I just think I mean, not that I don't listen, but usually I just think it's a bad indicator. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I try to definitely listen to people that have been in the game longer. I definitely feel like I definitely feel ignorant on a lot of things. That's like kind of the main reason I started this podcast, just so I'd soak up information. Yeah, I did want to get into. We talked about like the chronic pain and the kind of like the fragility around pain, like the catastrophizing of pain. There's something else I wanted to bring up.
I mean, just on that, the catastrophizing, I've been through all that as well. I'm sure you did with your back injury too.
Yeah.
But even though I knew better, it was really hard not to just think. This is exactly what you said earlier, which I love that, because I said the same thing. As I literally said to myself, that's it. This is my lot for the life. But you have to not do that. Logically, you have to see through that and keep trying.
Yeah.
It will improve.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing I wanted to get into. We're almost at the hour mark here.
I got time. Go on.
Yeah, like tracking progressive overload. What kind of like progression methods do you use? Do you think that it's extremely vital for like beginners to track all their lifts right off the bat? Because I know a lot of people that, like a lot of my, like even my brothers and some people that I see in the gym training, they're kind of like, I wouldn't say lazy about tracking, but they kind of just go, well, I just go to like failure every time, bro. It's like, how do you track progress? Like what's your method for doing that? And how should it apply to beginners, intermediates, and then maybe advanced people?
I think the actual tracking is really important. I think the method of progress isn't that important. So that's like two separate topics we could cover. I think you have to be able to track, because a lot of times, like when I was powerlifting, I was getting to the point where I was doing sets of 10 with 5 plates on a stiff leg deadlift. Like, that's the kind of shit you don't want to be doing on a Sunday morning. Like, you know, what's on the book? So if you just left it to chance, it wouldn't get done. Like, you have to push yourself. It's inherent in us as human beings is we have these ideas about where we want to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. The actual day-to-day reality of doing that tends to be more or less romantic than the notion of having it done. And I think that summarizes most people when they approach an endeavor. Like, I kind of want to be jacked, but I'm not sure I want to give up Pop-Tarts and donuts. Like, I'm no different, So, like, there's that. So I think tracking allows you to be objective. So that's the definite. I think tracking is 100% a must. But yeah, I'll cover the other point in a second. But what do you think about that?
Oh, I think tracking is a must, because for me, first off, I'm not going to remember what I did last time. And like, for me, it's like, I program a block, like 4 to 6 weeks or whatever, where I do the same movement. Like my leg day is the same, or whatever my split is. Like, I'm just repeating it, and I'm just trying to get stronger on each lift, add a rep in whatever rep range I give myself. And like, you can be kind of intuitive to a certain extent, where it's like, okay, well, maybe instead of going 8 to 12 reps, and then once I get to my 12 rep, I'm going to up the weight, go back to 8. I can go to 13 or 15 or like certain things like that. But if I don't have like a training log, like it's just math at that point, where I go into the gym and it's okay, that's going to suck, but I need to do that in order to push, train harder than last time. But it's like, I just have the math in front of me. And, and sometimes if I don't hit it, it's not the end of the world, but it's like, okay, well, next time I need to push it harder. And that just gives me so much purpose in the gym. And I can just look at my training log and, just progress from there. I don't really understand how people, maybe if I'm like I guess I'll share this as an example of not tracking right now. I'm on a cut and I'm still tracking everything, but I've kind of found like I've plateaued in a lot of ways. And then if I go to like triceps or biceps, I just pick the same weight I've been doing and just go to failure on them, just because I'm on a cut and I'm like not really concerned about. I just try to go really hard on them. So like for some certain smaller movements, I might not track, but if I was lean bulking, like I'm tracking everything, even isolated movements, and I'm trying to progress from week to week.
Yeah. I'd say also on that. I mean, it might not be necessary, particularly for you now, but even just generally for people, unless you're enhanced and stuff, you don't necessarily want to see progress every single session, as in hard and fast, like reps and weight.
Yeah.
There may well be. We used to call it owning the weight back in the day. That was the term we used to use it. So let's say you hit a milestone, you hit, I don't know, 3 plates on the bench for a set of 8 or set of 10. You don't have to go to like 3 plates in a quarter. You can just stick to 3 plates for like as long as 6 weeks. Just clean up the set. By the end of that 6 weeks, it'll be a nice, lovely, smooth, paused set. Great, that's still progress. So there are intangible ways to see progress, which is still progress. We used to call it owning the weight. And I do that with my clients, because they're not always going to see that tangible progress, particularly when they're dieting like you are. But other times they're just very strong. Now, a lot of the methods that we use to try and arrange our sets and reps, so like we use conjugate, for example, or like set and rep goal systems. So, you know, like Steve has his, I have my rep systems. A lot of these, all they really do is they super slow down the progress. So like a rep goal system allows you to add like one minuscule rep within a series of 50 reps, something like that. It just allows that small, teeny tiny bit of progression. And it's just a psychological ploy. So because on your book, you can go, I did one more rep. But even if you just stuck with the same 3 sets of 8 or like what you're doing, but just cleaned it up a little bit, that's still progress. It's just psychologically, and also with the written word being so popular, you know, online or like videos, it's just easy to communicate. So that's the real reason why these rep goal systems actually work well. It's not because there's a magic list of sets and reps. It's simply because they allow for minute amounts of progression. So yeah, I think the progressive level is important. That's the first thing. Writing things down is really crucial. Second thing is I think small amounts of progress that which don't have to be tangible are not only acceptable, but must be expected. I think most people have to really slow down how much of progress they expect. So what are you currently benching?
Right now I'm just doing 185. I'm not that strong. I'm doing like
185. That's good.
I think I'm doing like 4 sets of between like 6 and 8 reps. So I'm not a strong barbell bencher by any means.
No, but just for illustration, let's say if you've been you're late 20s now. Let's say over the course of the next, say, 4 years, you added just 25 pounds on your bench per year. Well, that's 285, you know, for a set that now you'll be as big as probably you ever will be at that stage. And that's 4 years. That's not a long amount of time, really, if you think about bulk cycles, cut cycles. But that's 25 pounds per year. I mean, let's break that down. Let's say charitably, we're having a progress of, say, 2.5 pounds a month with a couple of months spare for lols. Well, 2.5 pounds. I mean, that's hardly, I mean, not saying it's going to happen linearly. All I'm saying is the rate of progress, which is going to be a lot slower later on and faster now. That's really the rate of progress that people should expect. But if you think about it, how many people really want that 2.5 pounds per, not even 2.5 kilos, 2.5 pounds per week? And if they don't get that, they're gutted. Well, they want to change routines, you know?
I'm definitely focused on a nice slow progression over time because it's not something that I'm not in a rush. You know, I'm just trying to just put in my best every time, get stronger, more reps, more. But it's not like an aggressive, like I must get this right tomorrow. It's just a, you know, I'm in this for life, you know. It's
I mean, we're like May now, right? So let's say you finish off your cup, hits the summer, and then you spend, I don't know, 5 or 6 months bulking, right? And let's say let's do it. Let's say you get your 20 pounds this year, right? Because you hit 200 pounds at the end of this year for a set of 8. Okay. Now next year, let's say we have a couple of mini cut phases and you bulk. Let's say charitably you bulk for 6 months with some maintenance phases there. In that 6 months, I'm pretty sure you can net another 20 pounds. And then you do the same again the year after and the year after. Congratulations, you're up to 250 for 8s. So I think this is where people really need to start just relaxing a little bit, just like calm, you know, not you, but like most people, a lot of people who I see online, is just calm yourself down and like acknowledge that the rate of progress is going to be quite slow. I would love playing this game. I would do these calculations. It would get me really excited. When I was like, you know, when I was just coming up, I was like, awesome. If I put 5 pounds on my bench this month, just 5 pounds, by the end of the year, I'll have gained 50 pounds. And it'd be amazing. I'd be sat there as a kid, like a 19-year-old kid in my head thinking, that's going to be so cool. So, but that was the little games I play in my head. I think that's how people need to approach it.
And I think that's why tracking is so valuable too, because you can see where you were at previously. One thing that I don't do that I need to do a little bit better is I know Jeffrey, he has like a spreadsheet. So we'll have like, he'll see his progress like crazy. I remember a time when for dumbbell bench, this is like when I was like just getting into lifting where like 40 pounds was 2 40-pound dumbbells was hard. And now I'm benching with, I think last time I did use like 90s. It's kind of weird though. Cause like when I do dumbbell bench, just cause that's what I was doing for so long. And like, you think it'd be a lot harder using, I can't remember how many reps I hit, but I think I might have hit like 4 sets of 8 with 90-pound dumbbells on dumbbell bench. But then I go to bench and I'm doing 185 for like 6. It's kind of,
yeah, that's weird. Because they normally say the 80% rule. They normally say 80%.
But I've just been doing dumbbell bench for so long, and I think I can't remember. I got to look at my logbook and see exactly what I did. Maybe I didn't.
It probably means good things for your actual bench though when you go.
So I was kind of thinking like maybe it's just because I just started adding like barbell benching, and just the way the movement is, it's a little different, and that's kind of weird. So I'm wondering if there's like neurological adaptation. So maybe my bench will. That's the thing about it too, is like I feel like I'm at a position where I have like so much room to grow. I'm not even like close to where like my natty limit is, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's kind of an exciting place to be, because I feel like I've only actually been training well for like maybe the last 2 years. But even then it's kind of like I learned so much about training that today, like right now, I'm like, now I know how to train. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like you can waste your time in the gym a little bit if you kind of fall down the wrong rabbit holes.
You've been interviewing all these coaches, so everyone's eyes are on you now. So the pressure's on, Damien.
Yeah, I got to get freaking jacked.
You can't slip up, because like me, Steve, everyone else, they're all going to be on your case.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I'll actually kind of want to explain. Maybe I'll explain my current training to you, and you can kind of just critique it a little bit. Actually, maybe I can just find my little.
Yeah, if you can share it. But yeah, going back to what you said about spreadsheets, I like a good spreadsheet, definitely. I have all my clients get a spreadsheet, which is it's kind of evolved over the last 6 years, as long as I've been coaching, and I've just added in more things, and it's completely suited to my method of coaching. So I love good spreadsheet.
And I'm assuming you just kind of run the same. You just kind of run the same thing for quite a long time. Like what like. Do you go with the whole like mesocycle thing? Like how long are you doing the same program for?
For me personally, I only last about 4 weeks before I need a deload, or sometimes 3.5, 3. Just the way I've always been. I'm trying something new this time. I'm trying to extend it, but I'm skeptical. But yeah, normally my mesocycles are like 4, if I'm lucky, 5 weeks with a deload. Yeah, so I just repeat stuff a lot, really. It's fine. I'm quite, at the moment, I'm quite in my groove with everything. So I suspect training is going very, very well. So, but yeah, that's my general thing. Right, let's see what we're doing.
Okay.
Let's have a look, yeah. I'll put my coach's hat on for this. Let's have a look.
All right. Obviously, like this is like grocery list style. Like I know, like in my training log, these are just the rep ranges and sets that I'm going for. But in my training log, I have actual like numbers and weights and whatnot.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Of course.
So this is kind of a rough idea. It's just something like I was doing the push-pull leg split for a long time. And then I kind of got sick of that and I wanted to try something different. So right now I'm doing kind of like what Steve Shaw talks about. It's like the upper lower, but my lower is leg and back, which I haven't really quite gotten into the groove of that yet. It feels a little weird to me, but my upper body days feel good. So what I do is barbell bench. I feel like I'm going to be judged. You're going to rip me apart right now. Barbell bench press, 4 sets of 6 to 10, seated dumbbell overhead press, 4 sets of 8 to 12. I'm not these rep numbers don't matter as much, but so I do like a barbell movement, horizontal press, seated dumbbell overhead press, dips, just body weight, seated lateral raise, overhead tricep extension. So that's my upper body A. And then for upper body B, I'm just going to kind of go through these quick. I do seated barbell overhead press. So I do the vertical barbell push now. And then I do dumbbell bench press. Then I do deficit push-ups, seated lateral raise, tricep extension. For this one, though, I do a push down instead of an overhead tricep extension. So you can rip those days apart if you'd like.
I think yeah, because I've seen these splits before. Where I see a problem usually with these splits is the lower body volume tends to be quite lacking. So if you just scroll down a little bit so I can see lower A and lower B at the same time, that's it. So see the volume you got for your quads is 7 sets, which I wouldn't think is enough.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, or I mean, also depending on how you do the Bulgarian split squat, if it's very quad focused or glute focused, you may even have less than that. The hamstrings, you've got
Barbell good morning, and then the barbell stiff leg deadlift.
Yeah, hamstrings is like 13 sets, so you're doing pretty well for hamstrings. I mean, if you want, you could probably leverage some quad work. So maybe take out the lying hamstring curl on lower A and do knee extensions, because then you kind of even it out. You've got 13 sets for hamstrings and like 7 for quad, so that would probably take them both to 10, which is not bad. That's fine. There's no calf work, no ab work.
Yeah, I haven't been doing I did calves for quite a while, but I've kind of cut calves out. I was thinking about doing this is just 4 days a week, so maybe I was thinking about doing maybe 5 days, and then my 5th day would be like the isolated kind of like put in what I missed, kind of like the supplementation day, where maybe that's when I add in like the leg extensions and calves and abs and whatnot. But
okay, I mean, I suppose the major difference was my routines tend to be a little bit more volume, and I pay a little bit more closer attention to the rest between sets. I like people, as a bodybuilder, I just like people to work, like kind of like Alpha Destiny stuff. Like, let's get the work in. I'm not a massive fan of like low volume, minimalistic type of routines. If you're in the gym 4 days a week, we should be able to do a reasonable amount of volume. I've tapped out at 16 sets per body part per week on just a 4-day schedule with about an hour per session, just by timing my rest periods. A couple of minutes between compounds, about a minute between isolation exercises. And the research shows it doesn't end up making that much of a difference in the end. So I know everyone loves to quote that study of the longer rest periods give more stimulus per set, which is fine, and it's true. But it's good it's good set to set. But overall, you can get I think you can get a better stimulus by just having slightly higher volumes and slightly lower rest periods. Nothing crazy, but like 2 minutes for compounds is pretty good. I think maybe a little bit longer for squats and deadlifts if you're really gassing it. But in general, people adapt quite well, and you can ultimately do more work, which allows you to have more volume, more balance. So, I mean, there's nothing I would change for you right now. I think if you're going, just carry on going. But when you're bulking and you've got a bit more food and you're a bit more anabolic in general, I'd probably change it a little bit.
Yeah, I want to up the volume a little bit for sure. I definitely maybe rest. I try to rest because I heard that, I try to rest between 2 and 3 minutes. Usually with the compounds, it's more closer to 3 minutes, but it does feel like a long time. Cause that's, if I'm doing 4 sets of something, that's, 12 minutes where I'm just kind of like in the gym.
And do you kind of do you sit there after the second minute and like, I could go?
Yeah, but I do sometimes. I'm used to the 3 minutes. So if I go, I just want to just keep going. Like I want to rest for like a minute and jump right back into it. Another thing is, you'll have these people that do like 6 to 7 exercises a session. I can't do that. Like even just 4 exercises is like a lot for me. Not from a necessarily like I'm super tired, but like if I'm giving my all to those 4 exercises, I feel like that's almost enough in a session, and I also feel like I have like an attitude towards like, if I'm doing tricep overextension, it's not just like, oh, I'm doing my isolated movements now and I'm just going to half-ass them. Like I try to fucking push I try to treat my isolated movements as if they were compounds with the same kind of intensity. So it's like, if I'm doing 4 exercises, like almost like that's enough for me. So I don't know.
I mean, I try and do at least 3 or 4 major compounds, but not much more than that. But after that, I'm generally going to have a few isolation exercises. As much as we might say, we want to take them seriously, which we do. I mean, a tricep extension is not going to be as systematically draining as a squat. So I think it's just a case of you will adapt. Plus as more calories come in, you'll probably be able to do more work as well. So I like the attitude, but it's probably something that you'll adapt to. I think, and higher workloads, they just tend to work better in my experience. If you have a guy in a surplus and training a lot and training progressively, he's guaranteed to put on some muscle. If you've got a guy this is going back to the nutrition talk again, it's because it all stems from nutrition and the whole P ratio thing. If you've got a guy who ends up doing a fairly low volume routine where he's not really giving his muscles enough work, and he's eating a lot of food, that's a good recipe for a guy to get fat over time. And so I'm not warning people off gaining weight, because there's definitely a balance to be struck of give yourself a reasonable amount of work, make sure it's progressive, put yourself in a surplus, and you will grow. Do not enough work, put yourself in a surplus, it just tends to lead to lazy bulking, I think, in my experience.
Yeah, I don't want to do that again. And that's why I'm really excited to do like the reset where I go to 10%, reassess, you know, program really smart for my lean bulk. And I'm looking forward to that. No, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, man. We're at an hour and 15. I'm sure we'll probably do like 7 more of these at some point. All right, buddy.
We finally managed to talk more about training.
Yeah. No, man, I don't know. I listen to like health and fitness content. I probably listen to like at least an hour or 2 a day of just, you know, your content or whatever, whoever other creator. I'm obsessed with this stuff, so I could talk about it for hours. Cool, man. Well, if you can just let people know where they can find you, that'd be great.
Cool. Well, yeah. So firstly, thank you very much for having me on again, Damien. Really enjoy our chats and definitely happy to do it again. So you guys get me mostly on YouTube, just at Fazlifts. I'm also on Instagram as well, where I just post my training and my diet and stuff like that. But YouTube is the main thing. So go ahead and get in touch there, subscribe, and just say hello. And it'd be nice to speak to you all.
Oh yeah, man. You have a good rest of your day.
Cool. You too.